Just wanted to thank Roger Mark and the Wilson Center for putting this today together and convening everyone. And I also wanted to make a note that it's really thrilling to be up here with three dynamic and leading female voices. What I was hoping to touch on for Roger Mark's question is just give a little context of what UN Security Council Resolution 2250 is all about and where it came from, because there's a really nice story behind it. Then I thought I'd just touch very briefly on a few of the big challenges that we have going forward post 2250, and then just close very briefly with a couple thoughts about where we can go from here. So UN Security Council 2250. I think many folks in this room, just raise your hand real quick if you've had a hand in terms of lobbying for it, working around it. I know many folks here have actually played a concrete role in making this happen. But I think it's a testament to the fact that global youth today can have a real meaningful impact on the big issues of the day in the big arenas where discussions are happening, chiefly the UN Security Council. The resolution, as many folks know, is really the hard work of young people, of activists, of advocates, of NGO communities, of governments. And I think the story the resolution itself has really changed the narrative of young people, where if we think back to maybe 2 years ago, many governments saw young people through a lens of fear and insecurity. They understood the increasing numbers of youth and that technology at young people's fingertips was changing the way that people communicated. But I think there was still a narrative of youth as drivers of conflict and creators of instability as opposed to partners of peace. And if we move back to April 2015, where I start the story of Resolution 2250, the Crown Prince of Jordan, Crown Prince Hussein, convened a Security Council session at the age of 20 on the role of youth in countering violent extremism and promoting peace. You then move to August 2015, and global youth leaders from around the world gathered in Amman, Jordan, at the invitation of the government of Jordan, the United Nations, and a number of partners to really wrestle with these challenges of youth and peace building and extremism, and came up with the Amman Declaration on Youth, Peace, and Security. We then fast forward to September 2015 on the periphery of the UN General Assembly in 2015, and the US government hosted the Global Youth Summit Against Violent Extremism, which reconvened a number of youth leaders, advocates, activists, NGO communities to touch on the Amman Declaration and to craft a youth action agenda, which talked even further about ways that youth and governments could work together in collaboration. You then fast forward to this period of September to December 2015, where youth, NGOs, governments all came together, worked to draft a resolution, and then to push that resolution through governments, through advocacy avenues, and to actually get by December 9th of 2015, UN Security Council Resolution 2250 at the Security Council, when the US was president for that month. The Jordanians put the resolution forward. It was unanimously voted on and adopted. And here we are today, or here we were back in 2015 with the first ever UN Security Council resolution on youth, peace, and security, which was an achievement in its own right. And I think it does three things. It helps to harden the narrative of youth as partners for peace as opposed to drivers of conflict. It acknowledges that governments need to work with young people and youth organizations to be able to achieve wins in the peace-building space. And it also gives a boost to youth efforts to build a more peaceful, just, inclusive community, and also to ensure that not just men but young women are at the table in the peace-building process. I know you'll hear more about that in a few minutes. But the UN Security Council Resolution 2250 is a great first step. But at the end of the day, it's ink on paper. It's something that I think we can all hold up and be proud of, but it's ink on paper. And I think the task before us now and the task over the past year and going forward is how do you turn that ink into action? How do you actually make it come alive? And three of the challenges I think we still face regarding this effort is one, the fact that youth voices who are advocating for peace, who are working in the peace-building space, and who are pushing back against extremism are still far too seldom getting heard. We know for a fact that many people are moved by peers, and that friends are the ones who can really persuade people to actually join the movement or to push away or push down a more positive pathway. And we also recognize that governments often are not the most credible voice in the room. So we certainly need to do more to raise the voices, shine the spotlights on young people who are really advocating in this space. People like Allah, who you're going to hear from in a moment, who at the age of 21 started a Voice of Libyan Women, and has been working in the women's empowerment space to get women at the table in peace building in Libya and around the globe. And there are countless other stories of young people whose story needs to be told, both to inspire others and to show that we're united as a global youth community in peace building and pushing back against extremism. The State Department back in April of this past year launched the Emerging Young Leaders Award, which raised up 10 profiles from around the globe of young people who are really active in this peace building space and countering extremism. Secondly, I think young people today are still being targeted as potential recruits by groups like ISIL and other extremist elements. They're, because of challenging global times, war, ongoing civil war in Syria, tough economic times. We just saw a report recently about youth employment rates even increasing. There are a number of push and pull factors that are very real that folks are preying on disenfranchised youth and local grievances by offering senses of adventure, of dignity, of economic opportunity, and we collectively have to be able to push back against that in a more muscular, meaningful way. I think often about, I don't know if folks remember back in 2014, ISIL had a series of tweets, a campaign around their new pancake recipe. And it's kind of an interesting metaphor because they were trying to make the case 3.5 years into a serious civil war, and when it was a challenging time economically for a lot of people, they're going out with these tweets about this new pancake recipe and this picture of a stack of fluffy pancakes with syrup dripping down, and trying to appeal to young people that if you come join ISIL, this will be your daily breakfast when you have young people who are starving, and that kind of this is what life will be like if you're willing to join us. And from a metaphorical standpoint, I think that prompts us to two things. One, that we have to offer a better alternative to pancakes. As good as that looks, maybe it's waffles, maybe it's French toast, maybe it's crepes. We have to offer a better deal to young people. And two, we have to make the case that the big, fluffy stack of pancakes with syrup dripping down, when you bite into those pancakes, they're not going to taste as good as they look. And the fact that young people are not getting into what they may appear to be sold on. The third big issue, I think, is this lack of creative partnerships between governments and young people, and also youth-led NGOs and the private sector. And I think we need to get creative as a community to build upon UN Security Council Resolution 2250 to find better partnerships that are creative and that inspire more movements and action in the peace-building space. I think we can learn a lot from UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security that was adopted back in 2000, and the movement among what that sparked in terms of new partnerships in the women's empowerment space and ensuring the women were at the political table and the peace-building table. And I just want to also note that one of the efforts that we launched a couple weeks ago on the periphery of UN General Assembly this year was a partnership between the State Department with Facebook, with EdVentures. It was a peer-to-peer combating extremism program that we're expanding for high schools around the globe to try to allow them to spark their own campaigns in the peace-building space and to push back against extremism. So in closing, and then I want to open things up to the other dynamic panelists up here, we've come a long way, I think, in the past couple of years to change that narrative of youth as really drivers of conflict, to partners in peace. And I think the task in front of us now is to turn the ink of Resolution 2250 into real, concrete, mobilizing action. So I think we can do that in three ways. As noted before, I think we can double down our efforts to amplify the voices of young people who are leading in this space. I think we can tackle in a more muscular way the push and pull factors that are being utilized by extremist organizations to try to target young people and bring them down more nefarious pathways. And thirdly, I think we can create new creative partnerships and ways to work together between governments, young people, private sector, NGOs, to really figure out how we build upon the opportunity that 2250 has afforded us. So thank you.
Great.